Every fall, the same thing happens across the country. Branches get piled up, brush gets dragged to the curb, burn barrels come out. What took years for a tree to grow is destroyed in a single afternoon. Most people see cleanup. I see a loss. Those branches are not trash. They are stored water. They are slow fertilizer. They are structure for soil that could still be working 20 years from now. When you burn them, you're not just losing organic matter. You're throwing away future moisture and long-term resilience. Wood is carbon, yes, but more importantly, it is architecture. Inside every log is a network of cells designed to move and hold water. Trees evolved to lift water from the ground and survive drought. When that tree dies, the structure doesn't disappear, it just changes jobs. Buried in soil, it becomes a reservoir instead of a pump. Modern gardening rarely talks about this. We talk about compost, mulch, fertilizer schedules, all short-term inputs. But buried wood is different. It's not a seasonal amendment, it's infrastructure. Once it's in the ground, it keeps working whether you pay attention or not. Most people burn brush because they were taught it's waste, or because it's fast, or because that's how it's always been done. I burned plenty myself years ago. Then I started digging into old beds, old hedgerows, old forest edges. The soil there stayed cool. It stayed damp. It stayed alive when everything else dried out. That wasn't an accident. It was design, just not modern design. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee. In dry places, people assume the problem is lack of water. Most of the time, that's wrong. The real problem is that the land has nowhere to hold it. Rain comes, runs off, and disappears. Then the soil dries out, and we blame the weather. Mountain soils work differently. They don't depend on hoses or steady rainfall. They depend on storage. Forest slopes are full of fallen trees, broken branches, roots and leaf litter layered over decades. When rain or snowmelt comes, it doesn't rush away. It sinks in. It gets caught. Look at a forested hillside after a storm. The ground isn't muddy and flooded. It's damp, spongy, and stable. Water moves slowly through debris, not across bare dirt. Gravity still pulls it downhill, but the wood and organic matter interrupt that flow. They buy time. That's the key. Time in soil matters more than volume. A short, heavy rain can support plants for weeks if the ground knows how to hold it. A long drought becomes survivable if moisture is stored below the surface, where sun and wind can't strip it away. Flat, exposed ground does the opposite. It sheds water fast and heats up quickly. That's why flat fields need constant irrigation, not because plants demand more, but because the soil forgot how to keep what it was given. When you bury wood in soil, you're rebuilding that storage layer artificially. You're putting back what clearing and leveling removed. You're not fighting nature. You're copying how land handled water long before sprinklers existed. Once you understand this, irrigation stops looking like a solution. It starts looking like a workaround for missing structure. And structure, once rebuilt, keeps working quietly year after year. Most people hear about this method and think it's just mulch, piled into a hill. That misunderstanding is why many attempts fail. Mulch sits on the surface. Buried wood changes how soil behaves from the inside out. Surface mulch protects soil from sun and erosion. It slows evaporation. That's useful, but it's temporary. It breaks down fast and needs to be replaced. Buried wood does something else entirely. It alters the internal structure of the soil profile. Once it's underground, it becomes part of the system, not an add-on. When wood is buried, it's shielded from air and rapid drying. Decomposition slows down, fungi move in. Water stays trapped below the root zone instead of flashing off into the atmosphere. This creates a deep moisture reserve that surface mulch can't touch. Think of it like this: mulch is a raincoat. Buried wood is a cistern. One protects from loss, the other stores supply. This is why shallow beds dry out, while deep wood-filled beds keep producing. Roots don't live on the surface. They move down, especially during heat. When they hit buried wood, they find moisture long after the topsoil looks dry. Calling this mulching with logs misses the point. You're not feeding plants directly. You're building soil infrastructure that supports roots year after year without constant input. That's also why this method lasts decades instead of seasons. Compost gets used up. Mulch disappears. Buried wood keeps changing, slowly improving water retention and structure as it breaks down. Once it's in place, you don't manage it. You benefit from it. And that difference between maintenance and design is what separates short-term gardening from systems that quietly take care of themselves. When wood rots underground, it doesn't vanish. It changes jobs. A living tree moves water upward. A dead one buried in soil holds water in place. That shift is what most people miss. Wood is built from countless tiny channels. When the wood is fresh, those channels are stiff and closed. As fungi and microbes move and the structure opens, the log softens. Air spaces form. Over time, the wood turns into a natural sponge that absorbs water when it's available and releases it slowly when it's not. You don't need lab tests to see this. Dig into an older mound during a dry summer. The surface soil may be dusty and warm. Go down a few inches and it's cooler. Dig deeper and the wood is still damp. Not soaked, not dripping, just consistently moist. That's the condition roots look for. Clay can hold water, but it holds it too tightly. Plants struggle to access it. Decaying wood behaves differently. It gives water back gradually. It doesn't flood roots after rain, and it doesn't dry out fast in heat. It smooths the swings. After a heavy storm, the wood absorbs excess moisture. During drought, it releases small amounts back into the soil. That balance is what keeps plants stable when conditions shift. Once established, these beds don't need frequent watering because the water is already stored below the surface. Sun and wind can't reach it. Rain becomes a recharge. Snow becomes reserve. People call this a lazy system because daily work drops away. But the work wasn't avoided. It was done up front. Once the wood is buried and settled, the soil manages water on its own. That's the real difference. Adding water keeps you busy. Storing water keeps plants alive when it matters most. Water storage explains part of the story, but not all of it. The other piece is temperature. Buried wood changes how soil handles both cold and heat, and it does it quietly without equipment or power. As wood breaks down, underground microbes and fungi go to work. Their activity releases small amounts of heat, not enough to warm your hands, but enough to matter to roots. Soil over buried wood often stays a few degrees warmer than surrounding ground, especially at night. That difference matters in spring. Seeds germinate sooner. Transplants recover faster. A light frost that damages plants in flat soil often passes without harm over these beds. The warmth rises slowly from below, buffering sudden drops in temperature. In summer, the effect flips. Moist soil stays cooler than dry soil. The buried wood holds water, and that moisture absorbs heat during the day. Roots stay in a more stable zone, even when air temperatures spike. Plants don't shut down as quickly. Growth stays steady instead of stalling. This is why these beds handle extremes better. They're not immune to weather, but they soften the blows. Heat waves hit harder when soil is dry and exposed. Cold snaps do more damage when roots sit in bare, lifeless ground. Flat soil responds fast and violently to temperature swings. Wood-filled soil responds slowly. That lag is protection. It stretches the growing season on both ends without adding risk. You don't need to chase early planting dates or panic over late frosts. The soil does the buffering for you. And once again, it's not something you maintain. It's something you build once and let run in the background season after season. Modern growing relies on speed. Fast nutrients, fast growth, fast results. The problem is that soil doesn't work on a fast clock. When you push it with quick fertilizer, you get a short surge followed by decline. Plants grow, but the ground underneath gets weaker. Buried wood feeds soil differently. It doesn't dump nutrients all at once. It releases them slowly as microbes break the material down over years. That pace matters. Roots can only take up so much at a time. Anything more either washes away or burns off. With decomposing wood nutrients, stay where roots can find them. Nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, and trace minerals are released gradually tied up in microbial activity instead of sitting free in the soil. That reduces loss and keeps fertility stable. This is why beds like this don't need regular feeding. The soil is being fed continuously, just not aggressively. You won't see explosive growth early on. What you see instead is steady, resilient plants that don't crash mid-season. Fast fertilizer creates dependency. Miss a feeding and plants suffer. Slow fertility creates independence. The soil carries the system, not the gardener. Over time, this changes root behavior. Plants stop skimming the surface and start exploring deeper layers. They become more drought-tolerant and less sensitive to stress. That's not luck. It's structure and timing working together. This doesn't mean you never add anything. It means you stop chasing numbers and start building capacity. Once the buried system is in place, fertility becomes background noise instead of a constant chore. This is where many people get burned. They build a bed plant into it, and a few weeks later, the leaves turn pale. Growth slows. They assume the method doesn't work. In reality, they hit a known problem and didn't plan for it. Fresh wood demands nitrogen. As microbes begin breaking it down, they pull nitrogen from the surrounding soil to do the job. If you don't supply that nitrogen up front, they take it from your plants instead. That's the nitrogen trap. The signs are clear. Yellowing leaves, weak growth, plants that stall even though moisture is fine. This doesn't mean the system failed. It means the balance was off in the early phase. The fix is simple and predictable. You load nitrogen into the mound before you cap it with soil, fresh grass clippings, manure, kitchen scraps, green plant material, even diluted urine if that's what you have. This isn't theory, it's practical accounting. Carbon needs nitrogen to break down properly. Once that initial demand is met, the problem disappears. After the first year or two, the system flips. The wood stops stealing nitrogen and starts releasing it back slowly. From that point on, fertility becomes easier, not harder. People who skip this step often abandon the method too early. They don't realize the mistake is temporary and fixable. I've corrected nitrogen lockup mid-season by digging narrow channels, packing in green material, and watering it down. Plants recovered within weeks. The lesson is simple. Buried wood works, but it follows rules. Respect the biology, and it rewards you for decades. Ignore it, and the soil will teach you the hard way. Not all wood belongs underground. If you want a system that lasts decades, material choice matters. Get this wrong and you shorten the life of the bed or introduce problems you didn't plan for. Hardwoods are the backbone of long-term beds. Oak, maple, beech, and similar species break down slowly. That slow decay is what gives you years of water storage and steady fertility. These logs hold their structure long enough for fungi to colonize and for soil life to build around them. Softwoods like pine and fir still work, but they don't last as long. They break down faster, which means quicker water absorption early on, but a shorter overall lifespan. That's not a failure. It just means you're building a 10-year system instead of a 20-year one. Use what you have, but understand the trade-off. There are woods you should avoid entirely. Black walnut releases compounds that suppress plant growth. Cedar and redwood resist decay so strongly that they contribute little to soil life and can stall the system. Treated lumber has no place in the ground. Chemicals don't disappear just because you buried them. Rot level matters too. Older, partially decomposed logs are ideal. They absorb water faster and don't trigger as strong a nitrogen draw. Fresh green logs still work, but they demand more nitrogen up front. The goal isn't perfection, it's intention. Choose wood based on lifespan availability and how much effort you want to invest early. Once it's buried, you're committing to a long timeline. Build it like something you won't want to dig up again. A lot of beds fail because they're built to look good, not to last. Neat shapes and loose stacking might photograph well, but underground systems don't care about appearance. They care about contact and compression. When you stack logs, gaps are the enemy. Air pockets collapse over time. When they collapse, soil sinks. That creates low spots that collect water on the surface and dry out below. A stable bed starts with tight packing from the bottom up. Large logs go first. They form the frame. Smaller branches fill the gaps. Twigs, bark, and wood chips go in last. Every space should be filled with something. Think of it like dry stacking stone. You don't rely on one big piece, you lock everything together. After the wood comes the nitrogen layer. This isn't optional, it's structural in a biological sense. That green material feeds the microbes that bind the system together. Without it, the mound stays loose and hungry. Then comes soil, not a thin skim, a real cap. Roots need soil contact before they reach the wood layer. Too little soil dries out fast and exposes the system before it stabilizes. Settling will happen. Expect it. Plan for it. Build higher than you think you need. The goal isn't to stop movement. It's to make sure movement happens evenly without collapse or washout. Once built correctly, the bed stops demanding attention. It doesn't erode. It doesn't slump. It ages slowly and predictably. That's what you want. Not something you constantly fix, but something that quietly does its job while you focus on growing. The biggest mistake people make is judging these beds too early. The first year is not the finished system. It's the startup phase. Things are still shifting underground, and patience matters. In the first season, moisture may not behave the way you expect. Some beds hold water immediately. Others take a full winter to really load up. That depends on wood type, rot level, and rainfall. This doesn't mean it failed. It means the reservoir is still filling. Plant choices matter early on. Shallow-rooted crops do fine, but deep-rooted plants really shine once the wood starts releasing moisture consistently. Heavy feeders may look average the first year, then outperform everything else by year 3. You may see settling, that's normal. Add soil or mulch as needed. Don't tear the bed apart trying to fix it. Most issues resolve themselves as the biology stabilizes. By the second year, the system starts showing its real value. Watering drops, soil stays cooler, roots dig deeper, growth evens out. This is usually when people realize they haven't touched a hose in weeks. If something looks off, look at balance, not failure. Nitrogen issues fade. Microbial life ramps up. Earthworms move in. The bed stops acting like a construction project and starts acting like soil. This method rewards patience. If you expect instant perfection, you'll miss the long-term gains. But if you give it 2 seasons, the ground begins carrying the workload for you. This method didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because the system around it changed. Once farming became mechanized, the land had to adapt to machines, not plants. Tractors, plows, and harvesters need flat ground. They need predictable rows and uniform depth. Mounds, buried wood, uneven settling, none of that fits well with steel equipment moving at speed. So the land was leveled. Debris was cleared. Anything that slowed a machine was removed. At the same time, fertilizer and irrigation made it possible to replace structure with inputs. Instead of soil holding water could be pumped. Instead of slow fertility, nutrients could be spread on demand. That worked, but only as long as fuel chemicals and infrastructure stayed cheap and available. Buried wood systems don't scale easily across thousands of acres. They're slow to build and hard to standardize. From an industrial perspective, that's inefficient. From a resilience perspective, it's the opposite. Once the mounds were gone, so was the soil's ability to manage itself. Fields became dependent on constant correction. Miss a fertilizer application and yields drop. Lose irrigation and crops fail. The system runs hot and fragile. This isn't a criticism of farmers. It's a description of constraints. When scale and speed become the priority, long-term soil memory gets erased. Small growers don't face those limits. Backyards, homesteads, and small plots can afford to build for decades instead of quarters. That's where this method still makes sense and always has. Most people growing food today aren't working open fields. They're working small spaces with real limits. Water bills, heat, poor soil, rules about runoff or burning. That's exactly where this system fits. In many neighborhoods, branches can't be burned anymore. Brush has to be hauled off or chipped. That costs time or money. Burying wood turns a disposal problem into a long-term asset. Instead of paying to remove material, you put it to work under your soil. Water is the same story. Municipal rates keep climbing. Restrictions show up every summer. Dragging hoses becomes routine. A bed that stores water below ground reduces how often you need to irrigate, and in some cases, removes the need altogether once it's established. Urban and suburban soils are usually compacted and thin. They don't absorb water well. They heat up fast. Adding buried wood rebuilds structure from below, where compaction is hardest to fix. Over time, the soil loosens without mechanical work. This method also scales down well. You don't need acres. A single bed can support a surprising amount of food once it matures. The benefits compound year after year, even if the space stays the same. What matters is that the constraints haven't changed. Water is still limited. Soil still degrades when ignored. Inputs still cost money. What has changed is that fewer people remember how to build systems that reduce dependence instead of increasing it. This isn't about going backward. It's about using methods that match today's realities instead of fighting them. Calling this a lazy system misses the point. There's nothing lazy about building it. Digging, hauling, wood packing layers, this is real work. The difference is when the work happens and who keeps doing it. Most gardens demand constant attention, watering schedules, feeding cycles, fixing problems as they show up. Miss a week and things slide backward. That's not efficiency, that's dependency. A buried wood bed flips that arrangement. You do the hard work once up front. After that, the system carries more of the load each year. Watering drops. Feeding becomes optional instead of mandatory. Soil improves without being pushed. This matters more as people get older. Kneeling, lifting hoses, hauling bags, those tasks add up. A garden that asks less of your body but gives more back isn't lazy, it's sustainable. The soil becomes the worker. Roots go deeper. Microbes manage nutrients. Moisture stays where it's needed. Your role shifts from constant intervention to observation and adjustment. That's the real value. Not saving effort in the short term, but reducing friction over time. You're not chasing problems. You're preventing them by design. This approach respects limits, physical, financial, and environmental. It doesn't rely on perfect weather or endless inputs. It assumes things will get harder, not easier, and builds accordingly. A system that runs quietly in the background isn't lazy, it's mature. And once you experience that shift, it's hard to go back to gardens that only work if you're always standing over them. Most gardening advice focuses on this season, this harvest, this yield. That mindset makes sense if you expect systems to stay stable. Lately they haven't. Water access changes, prices jump. Weather swings harder than it used to. Buried wood systems don't solve everything, but they do something important. They remember. Long after you've stopped adding inputs, the soil keeps working with what you gave it years earlier. That memory is physical. Water stored in decomposed wood. Nutrients released slowly over time. Structure that resists compaction and erosion. None of that disappears when you skip a week or a season. It carries forward. This is how land used to be treated, not as a surface to manage, but as a body to invest in. The payoff wasn't immediate, but it was reliable. People built soil knowing someone else might benefit later. You don't need to romanticize that. You just need to recognize the advantage. A bed that feeds itself and waters itself reduces risk. It buys margin. It keeps producing even when attention drops or conditions turn rough. That's what resilience looks like in practice. Not stockpiles or panic, just systems that don't fall apart when pressure increases. Every buried branch is a decision. Burn it, haul it away, or turn it into something that works quietly for decades. The soil doesn't care about trends or arguments. It responds to structure and biology. What you build into the ground now will still be there years from now, doing its job whether you're watching or not. That's not nostalgia, that's practical foresight, and it's one of the few advantages a small grower still fully controls.